Our two text verses, 1 Corinthians chapter number 2, verses 9 and 10. It says, "But as it is written, eye hath not seen nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. But God hath revealed them unto us by his Spirit, for the Spirit searcheth all things, yea, the deep things of God." And of course, last week in our lesson time, we were discussing, and we more or less finished up the thought of using the ear to learn, how God uses the ear in our learning, and the people in which that he uses to try to teach us. We looked at Old Testament examples of the man of God, the prophet. We looked at the high priest and how those kind of correlate, and you can draw the same type of responsibilities over into the New Testament from those examples of being who God uses to speak through and different things like that. So today I'm wanting to jump down and deal with the locate part of this. And I know that kind of sounds weird, locate or location, but there's a reason I put it there. One, so it would alliterate my L's, obviously, but locate basically, when you think of the word locate or location, it's somewhere something is put. I'll use Brady as an example just because it's recent on my mind. Last week, he invited me to come down and help him work on his car. And he has locations in his toolbox for certain tools. And he goes, "Will you get me this?" And I'm like standing over there looking. I'm like, "I don't know what I'm looking for." And he goes, "It's at this particular spot on this little thing right there." And in exactly where he told me is where I found what he was wanting and needing. So I just was able to pick it up and walk over there and hand it to him while he was crawled up and underneath his car working on it. When you're thinking about stuff like that, we can all think of things that we have at our home, in our personal life, where we put stuff. We have locations. Like me, I have certain locations that I kind of have a little bit of OCD in me here, and I like things done a certain way and stuff. So I like when I get ready for work, I come in, I get my lunch packed the night before, and I put it in a certain spot in the refrigerator with everything on top of it. So I just grab it out, throw it in my lunch box, and I'm out the door. And I'll do the same thing with my work clothes. They go in a certain spot. Location means a lot because that's where we go to find what it is that we're looking for. When I'm, my boss, he's not the most organized of individuals. And when I get on his truck, if I'm having to work, he has to run a route, and I get on his truck to unload the empties when I'm stuck on the dock. I get on there and I'm looking at the mess that he has worked in all day, and I'm going, there's no way I could do this, because my OCD is such that, I like everything, and I put everything in a certain place where I know to go look for it. Because who likes spending a lot of time going and looking for something when you don't know where it's at? I can't do that. I don't like doing that. That's why if I go and look for something, I start asking, has anybody seen this? Because I'm ready to move on and not spend forever looking. There's a lot of people when it comes to our spiritual life. A lot of times we kind of mimic the wandering nomad in the desert back in the day. They're just out there just wandering around, just, leisurely going from one place to the other, not really ever settling down, not getting anywhere to where they can set up roots, so to speak. My dad, I'll use him for an example. My dad, back when I was younger, when I was a kid, he had this dream of building a house before it became the thing to do. He had this dream of building a house, living in it for like 6 months to a couple of years, and selling it and building another house and building another house and constantly moving and building houses and moving until he was finally able to get to the point to where he was able to build a house completely without owing anything on it. And this is back before, now that's what, people try to do in today's society. But this is back in the early 80s, back right after the economy was at its worst in recent history, and a lot of people were out of work and different things. As it's coming out of the 70s, I know this is probably going right over a lot of your all's heads, but this is the reality that we faced back when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, coming out of that. And my dad had this dream of being able to do that, and he's kind of more what you would call the wandering spirit. He doesn't have to be tied down in one spot. If I was to ask each and every one of you in here, what do you consider to be your home place? There's going to be some place in your mind that you're going to go back to and say, this is the home place. This is where I remember growing up, and this is where I remember. And a lot of times there's a lot of, good memories, fond memories that we look back on, that's tied to that place. For me, it would be the time that we spent over on Cameron Road. We didn't live there that long, but that's where I consider to be my home place. And we wound up, of course, that and where my grandmother lived. I was there in both places a lot. So I'm fond of two places. But as far as my own personal home place where I can go back to and remember growing up and different things, I go back to that location. That's the location that I go back to in my mind. When it comes to our spiritual life, when God puts us somewhere that we can locate, that we can grow where He puts us, the Bible tells us that He plants us by the rivers like the cedar tree. Or he tells us that over in the book of Psalms. But that's kind of where we go. God will put us and plant us somewhere that is going to help us grow. But a lot of times we have to be willing to find that location. For a lot of us in here today, right now, that location that God has us at this particular time in our life is here at Gilead Baptist Church. It's a good place for you to be because you can learn something if we're willing to take the time to do so. But at the same time, in that location, there is more to it than just coming and collectively growing. There's a lot of personal time that still needs to be put in because at some point in time, you're going to wind up wind up leaving and going somewhere else where God will move us. I mean, where our recent transplants here, Travis and Miss Kaylin back here, they struggled with that for a little while back when they were looking at leaving where they had been and where they had been serving and everything else. But there was something that God had put in their heart that He knew they would need for their walk with Himself, that they were not going to get where they were, and He brought them here. And there's a struggle when you have a tie to some place. There's always that struggle of leaving that place. But if you're leaving because God is moving you from one place to another in that location, you can't just blindly step off the ledge and say, well, God, if this is what... No, there's a lot of time. And I'm sure if we were to ask Travis and Miss Kaylin back there was a lot of time put into prayer, talking back and forth with one another about the possibilities of leaving where they were and moving their membership here and setting up roots here in this church and transitioning from one place to here. because that's just not something that you just kind of go through willy-nilly and just basically do. If you're really searching and looking for the will of God in your life, you're going to have to put forth the effort to try to find that will that God has for your life and where He wants you to be. There's a few in here that's going to be looking at getting married. They may not stay here. There may come a time where they have to leave and go somewhere else. I don't know. They don't know. God does. But if they want to stay in God's will, they will have to put forth the effort to get in the Bible and study and ask God for the direction of their life. I mean, I look back at a time when I was a member in this very church. And not more than like, what was it now, 7-8 years ago, something like that. I was looking at the possibility. I had to make the decision that, was it time for us to leave or was it not time for us to leave? And God settled that in my heart, and I went and talked to the pastor, and I talked to my fellow deacons, and we wound up leaving for a season. I look back on it and I have ideas of why God moved us out. I don't know for sure, but God did move us out. He took us out for a season, and then He has since then brought us back into this season that we're in now. And I'm hoping that we're able to stay here for the duration, because because there's just something special about this place and this church and the people of this church. But still, yet when it comes to that decision of leaving, you have to really put forth the effort to find the exact will for God in whether or not the location that He has you in is where you're going to stay, or will there come a time that He may move you to a different location and plant you. But you have to be willing to put your life in the hands of God. And we were able to do that when it comes to the times of our private times when we're actively seeking God's will for our life. I've always been told that for the majority, you're never going to find God's will till you're right in the middle of it. I know that sounds kind of crazy. But, God is not going to give us, like turn-by-turn directions like we get with the GPS on our phones. He's not going to tell you, okay, at this time in your life, you're going to be here. You're going to go here. You're going to do this, X, Y, and Z. He doesn't do that. He will, at different times in our lives, He will reveal things to us if we're looking and searching for the direction that He has for our life in those seasons, in those times. I cannot tell you how each one of us in here are going to experience those types of seasons. That's an individual thing between you and the Lord. But there will be something different. I can tell you this. There is going to be something different when that time in your life comes to where God is going to start dealing with you about some direction that He is wanting each and every one of you to go in. And it's up to you to find if that is exactly the direction that He has for us. And it sounds crazy, I know, but He will speak to you in that still small voice, like we looked at, a couple of months ago with Elijah, when he was in the mount, in the cave, when he had fled from Jezebel, when he was fleeing Jezebel, because she had told him, I'm going to kill you this day, and he takes off and running, and he winds up in the cave, and then all the different things come and go, and if we're not careful in our walk with God, we'll hear all of the clamor and the clatter and everything else going on out here, and we'll think that God's in that, and that's the direction that we need to go in our life, when God is going to speak to us in a still small voice And we have to know, we have to be able to hear and listen and understand the difference in the times in which God is speaking to us. We're going to find that if you get in your Bible and you start studying out and looking for God's will, when that time comes in each and every one of us' life, there's just going to be something different. I can't explain it for a lot of you in here. It's kind of hard to put into words, but there's going to be a time come when something just doesn't set right. I hate to use the word feel, because that's kind of got a broad term, but there's going to be something in our spirit that when God is going to start dealing with you about something, there's going to be something in your spirit, in your spirit with Him, that's just going to kind of feel a little off. I hope I'm making sense with this and what I'm trying to say. But there's always going to be something just a little off. This is kind of what I experienced when God was moving us out about 8 years ago. I mean, something just at the time, there was just something in the church that just did not set right, did not feel right. I was feeling a lot disconnected from the church. I still had responsibilities. I was still active, still doing things in the church. And so, but my spirit, there was just something off in my spirit that was just kind of like, there's a little rub, so to speak. And it's those times, that's when we have to really ratchet it up and start getting in the Bible and start finding out, praying and asking God, what's going on? Is it time for me to leave? Is it time for this? Are you trying to do this? Are you wanting me to do this with my life? And He's not going to give you the audible voice. Yes, Travis, you need to leave and go to Gilead. Did you ever hear that voice? No. It doesn't work that way. We want it to. Would it not have been easier if that special Bible we talked about last week, would you just open it up and it just said, boom, there it was, like an iPad screen. You can leave and go to Gilead. Wouldn't it be so much easier, when it came to following God? But when that spirit's just not jiving with where you're at in your life, and then when you start getting in and you start trying to find God's will, and then you take that step of faith and say, well, maybe it's time, and then you step out and you start looking, and then you go to another church, and then there's just something that, something's not, you can go to different places, and this just ain't it, this ain't it. And then you go to one place and it's just like, boom, you just kind of, this feels like home. It's weird. I can't explain this. But each and every one of us in here are going to experience those seasons in our life. And what I'm really struggling and trying to get across is that when it comes to finding the location that God has for each and every one of us to be in our walk with Him, is that He will reveal it in time. We're not going to be told, leave here, go there. It doesn't happen all the time. To some people, that's what it takes. But for the most part, God is going to start dealing with your heart. There's going to be that spiritual disconnect to some degree. And you're going to start feeling, that something just ain't right. This ain't where I need to be right now, this season in my life. And then you start putting forth the effort to look for God's will, and you get in the Bible, and then He will show you. Not only that, but I remember I'd been for several weeks just kind of feeling like, something just ain't right. And I hate to keep using myself in this one time, but I don't really have any other way to try to get across the point that I'm trying to make other than to use myself in this part of the lesson. But for several weeks, I'd been praying, Lord, what's going on? Is it time for me to leave? Is this what you're trying to tell me? And then I came in and sat down upstairs in Sunday school, and Johnny got up and brought the lesson. And the whole time he was up there. Now, I had been searching for the will of God in my personal time. But then I get up there on that particular Sunday, and the lesson that God had put on Johnny's heart come in, and God just settled it for me. He said, it's time. And I sat there the rest of the service. Now, that's Sunday school. We still got, the singing, or we still got the preaching and everything else. But in the middle of Sunday school, sitting upstairs, the Lord had put it on my heart, it's time to go. And it was settled. And I called the deacons. We went right in here in this nursery, and I told them, and we talked about it. We prayed about it. And I told them what I was going to do, what I felt like the Lord was leading me to go do. And we talked about it. We prayed about it together. And then I was coming out, and it just so happens that the pastor was coming around this corner, and I grabbed him, and we went down to his office, and I told him the same thing. And we prayed about it, and we talked about it. And, then it wasn't, a month and a half later, we figured out where God wanted us, and that's where we went. It's a very, very difficult decision, and a very difficult thing and decision to make in that moment. I know, Travis and Kaylin back here struggled with that, and I hate to keep using you all, but this just happened to you all recently in this part too. But it's rather difficult when it comes to trying to find that spot, because we grow attached to places. Just like I mentioned to you earlier, where does your mind go back if I asked you where was your home place? Where do you remember growing up with the fondest memories? If it was several different places, there's going to be one that sticks out that you go back to and you say, this is my home place. And I can take you to the place that I look fondly back on and calling home, right over here, just about 0.2 of a mile down the road from Miss Ford on Cameron Road. That's where I go back to. And I don't know where that place is for you. I don't know where that place is that God, can deal with you and speak to you and help you in. But God has a location. There's several different. You can have a location that's a church, that God will speak to you through the Sunday school teacher, through a song, through something that somebody just happens to come by and say. But He can also speak to our heart through the pastor, through the message, through all of these things. Is how God can speak to our hearts and speak to our lives to help us and to show us this is. But there has to be that personal time also that you're spending, and you're investing in what God has for you. I mean, we can even use Josiah here, how he'd been praying about and feeling like God had something for him to do. And then during the prayer revival a little over a year ago, that he decided he felt like God was calling him into the military. And what a decision that was. I mean, that was not an easy decision, I'm sure, to be looking at having to leave home and to leave family and everything, and go into this wicked place. I've seen some of the insides on some of these Army, especially down here at McGee Tyson. I've been to the inside the BX. There's more alcohol than there is food in that place. It's not the military is not someplace that that you're going to go to and find God. You're going to go to and you're going to find the most wicked stuff available to mankind and stuff. And I see Travis back there shaking his head, and Josiah's shook his head. Yes, I mean, and I'm sure John knows. John has some stories he could tell about his time in the Navy and different things. But what I'm saying is that you're not going to find the will of God out there in the world. You're not going to find the will of God listening to the things of this world and playing around with the things of this world, going into the world. You're not going to find the will of God, but you're going to find the will of God in your personal studies. You're going to find the will of God in your personal prayer time. You're going to find the will of God in that location, the church, the place that He has put you to help you grow in the grace and the knowledge of Jesus Christ, so that you can, and you and I can, make the best decisions for us when it comes to God's will. Now, with that being said, going back to what I said a few minutes ago, you're not going to find the will of God till you find yourself in the middle of it. If I was to ask Brother Travis back here, would that be true for you? Did you find yourself right now in God's will, but you didn't find it till you was already involved in it? Right? I mean, you knew God had called you to preach, but you didn't know where God was going to put you to develop that and bring you along and grow you in that He had called you, until you found yourself here in this place and resisting to some degree, as is going to be the thing with most of us. We're always going to be, oh no, I can't do that. I mean, I know this is going to be hard for a lot of you all to believe, but to this day, I know I've said this before, but I am more of an introvert. I'm not. I know I am. Exactly right. But the only reason that I'm able to get up here and do what I'm doing right now, and to do what I do in the church, is not because of anything that I have inside of me, because you put me around a bunch of people that I don't know, and I'm just keeping my mouth quiet, and I'm just over here. Now, once I get to know you, all bets are off,
So you're saying more like the Lord?
For the most part, when I first meet somebody, no. But when I first meet someone, I'm reserved. I stay back. I don't really look for the limelight. I'm not trying to be out there in front of everybody. But when it comes to teaching this class, the only reason that I'm able to be here to do this is because this is what God has put in my heart to do. And He has equipped me with the ability to get up here and do this. It ain't because I can. I can make a mess of it if I'm up here doing it on my own. But because God has put it and give me the ability to get up here and teach a class and try to help young people in their life getting started and trying to find God's will for each and every one of you in His life. He's given me that ability. This is nothing that I have. I don't have the ability to do this. God has enabled me, because this is what He's called me to do, and this is what I'm doing. This is how and where I'm faithfully serving Him. And, did I ever imagine being in this position? No. But here I am in the middle of it, of God's will, serving Him, serving you, trying to help you all in your walk with God, because God has put that in my heart, and that's what I'm doing. I didn't get here by happenstance. I got here because God moved, opened doors. We're here, but it's all because I found the will of God when I was in the middle of doing it. That's the way God works. I'm not trying to blanket statement everything like a lot of people do. But if you're really willing to sit down and look and study and try to find and locate God's will for your life, you will find it when you're in the middle of doing it. That's just the way God works. So the location, you're going to find that through your prayer life, through your personal studies, and when you're in the middle of God's will, you'll know it. I mean, this has been a very difficult part of the lesson for me to try to bring out, but that's basically that's what the location is. Wherever God has intended for you to be, you will find it when you're in the middle of it.
Was it easier the second time when you were somewhere else and you thought this is where we're supposed to be, and all of a sudden you felt like, well, I'm not supposed to be here, I'm supposed to go somewhere else, and you decided to come back here? Was it easier for you to understand what he was saying, or was it easier for you to feel like I need to move?
Well, when it came to leaving when we left and before we came back, I guess is what you're asking. It had a lot more to do with the fact that, I had gotten out of church because of COVID, all the lockdowns and all this, that, and the other, and different things like that. So it made it easier. Well, it wasn't easy to come back, but it made it easier to get back into a church and then to find God's will once I got there. Now, like I said, I had gotten out of church, wasn't living for God, wasn't doing a lot for God, more or less just kind of living my life that wound up affecting Brady and Destiny and Lori to some degree and everything else. So we were able, because there for the longest time, I was the only one coming. And unfortunately, I used Brady as my example or my reason not to get back into church because he wasn't driving at the time. And he worked every Sunday. And Lori had to work every Sunday. But when I made the effort to get back and to find God's will for my life, Johnny called and invited me to come back, to come to church, visit. I did. And then God just kind of moved from there because, coming back here was really a scary proposition for me because I didn't think I'd ever be able to come back to this church when God took us out. Doesn't always happen that way. But thankfully, the Lord allowed that to happen in my life to where I was able to come back. And, then God started working. Once I started getting my life back on track, right with Him and everything else, He was able to then start opening doors back up for me to do something that He had put in my heart years ago to be able to do. And then the opportunity for this class came along and we run with it. And I have enjoyed it. Looking forward to what else God's got in store for us along with this. So, that's just kind of the location. There's going to be some thought. There's going to be some searching and some looking that we're going to have to do all on our own to know the true will of God, for Him to open and reveal that to us when we find where God has us to be. So, hope that helps. Next week we'll jump back over here and we'll start dealing with, I think I'm calling that the erroneous spirit. The erroneous spirit. I think that's what I call it. I'm not 100% sure. Huh?
I have the country of origin.
The country of origin. Let's see. 0